So thanks for joining us at Somerset Diverse Communities Events Management Training. My name is Jusna Mustafa and I work for Somerset Diverse Communities. And I think this webinar really came about after conversations with lots of different people in the community all across Somerset, talking about running events and not really knowing where to start, where to go, and being quite scared really about the legalities around running an event. So we've put this together and we hope that it answers lots of different questions for lots of different people. I thought we would just do a quick round of who's here as to your name and just what you want to get out of the session, if that's okay. Joanna, do you want to go first?
Hello, I'm Joanna Bogunska and I represent Polonia in Yeovil and Shepton Mallet and surrounding areas. And I'm just really curious because every time I think about organizing an event, the list of things really scare me. So I hope to get a confidence afterwards after this meeting.
Wonderful. Thanks, Joanna. Tessa, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Tessa. I'm the new events director at the Child Community Hub. And my background is youth work, so I'm used to running events on a much smaller scale for young people, but hosting and organising larger events is brand new to me, so I need any knowledge you have.
Wonderful, thank you. Just going to let somebody else in. Janine, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm actually Justin's colleague. I'm the Interfaith and Belief Coordinator for Somerset Diverse Communities, and we are really trying to encourage people from the smaller in number faith communities across Somerset to perhaps hold some events to strengthen their profile and engage with the wider community. So I'm here representing the interfaith community.
Wonderful, thanks, Janine. Lewin, thanks so much for being able to join us. Hey, we're just introducing ourselves and just saying a line or two about what we want to get out of the session, if that's okay.
I'm sort of new to sort of event management, and I just really want to understand sort of what the basics really and how to move forward with it. I was involved with the Chart Together on last Saturday, and it was really, it was a really successful sort of event. But I'd like to be more actively sort of involved in the back room, sort of understand how to actually put it together. So that's why I'm here. Yeah, hello.
Wonderful, thanks, Lewin. So what we'll do is we can have questions throughout. I think it's quite a small informal group, so please feel free if you can just put your hand up, and I'm sure Alice will be more than happy to answer anything that you have. And we'll go from there, but there will be space for questions at the end as well. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Alice Alice Edmonds from Love Yeovil, who has been the most amazing supporter for me because I've run a few events, particularly Yeovil Together. So she's been a wealth of knowledge and information and just an amazing support. So Alice, I'm going to hand it all over to you now.
Oh my God, the pressure. So hi, I'm Alice Edmonds. I work for Love Yeovil. We're a CIC, and if you haven't guessed, we're based in Yeovil. So I'm the marketing and events coordinator, and I've been with Love Yeovil for 4 years now. Please excuse my voice. It was timely. It came on this morning. I don't normally sound this croaky. So I've been in post for 4 years now, and Love Yeovil, for those of you who don't know anything about it, we are here to promote Yeovil positively, to help community groups in the town who want to organise events. And we also organise our own events for the town. So everything we do is not for profit. And we're here just to make Yeovil the best place we possibly can for everybody to live, to do business, for people who want to come here for holidays, and to attract more people into the area. And there's so much good that's happening in the town. So we're kind of like the happy news, the good news stories of Yeovil. And I think everybody is guilty of being a bit down on wherever they live. but it's reminding people that there's good stuff happening everywhere. I actually live in Crewkerne, so I'm quite close to Chard. I have some connections there, so it's nice to have some people from locally. So a bit of background about me. I've been an event manager for most of my career. Growing up, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do, but I was always the organised one. And when I did my HND at Yeovil College, which was in leisure and recreation management, there was a module of event management. And that was the one that really kind of sparked my interest. And I went into leisure and recreation management as a foundation degree because I was quite sporty. I knew I wanted to do something in a kind of sporting area, but wasn't sure what, but not necessarily coaching, but the kind of more facilities of sports. Anyway, that's how I got my introduction to event management. And then from there, event management wasn't actually a standalone subject when I went to university. So I applied to do a business and leisure management degree. But before I joined uni, they actually changed it to an event management degree and did it purely as event management. So the course I actually signed up for, I didn't end up doing, and I ended up doing an event management degree. And I was one of the first in the country to graduate with an event management degree because it was such a new subject. It had always been a sort of tag on to business degrees, but it had never been a standalone thing. Now I think nearly every university in the country can do it. And if you go for a degree in event management, you're very lucky now that you actually get work experience. Part of the degrees are usually sandwiches, so you have a year out in industry. And I have to say, everything I learned in my degree, I have never used. And I was very lucky to get a job when I left university for Ironman UK, which is a triathlon. And the organisers of that event just happened to be in Yeovil. And I had worked for them in the summer because they had a shop as well selling triathlon kit. So when I got my event management degree, they said, do you want to work for a large international sporting event? And I said, yes. So I was very, very lucky that I got my dream job straight out of university. Not everybody's that lucky, but if anybody is interested in this as a career, I would suggest volunteering as much as you can at events because they are always keen for volunteers for marshals. And in sort of my career, I've been very lucky that I've always found work in Yeovil to do with events. There have been some times when I haven't. And in those quiet periods, I've actually volunteered for events in Yeovil, and I actually got a job at Yeovil Show because I was their sponsorship steward. So that's a bit of background about me. So I've done international sporting events. I've done a local farmers show, kind of like the Bath and West. I don't know if anybody went to the Yeovil Show. Sadly, it didn't last very long. And then I've done private charity events for sort of high wealth clients. And now I do Love Yeovil, which is the Christmas lights switch on and helping with the Yeovil Together event. I think we've got some work to do on Yeovil Pride. We've done Lantern Parade. So everything now is kind of smaller community events. And I have to say, it's far more rewarding and less stressful than big international corporate events. So that's a bit of background about me. And now we'll kind of go on to my presentation. As Justin said, if anybody has got a question at any time, just stop me if there's something doesn't make sense or you want me to clarify. This is informal and it's for you guys to get out of this what you want. So just stop me at any time and I'm happy to explain in more detail. So let me just share my screen. And you can see my presentation. Right, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yep, you can see it.
Cool. So I've already said a bit about us, that we're not for profit. We've been going for about 8 years, but I've only been with them for 4 years. We became a CIC in November last year. And as I said, we're here to promote all things good and positive that's happening in the town, to organise community events in the town and help others with their events, and basically to create a better Yeovil for everybody. Right, so first things first with event management. Do not panic. everybody says, oh my goodness, I've got to organize an event. I don't know where to start. And it isn't a complicated beast. So I always start with this kind of checklist. It's your who, what, where, why, and when. So who is it you're organizing an event for? What are their needs? What are their wants? And what's the purpose? So what's type of event? So let's just say you've been asked to organize, we'll go with the youth event. So maybe you're going to have like a youth music festival. So your target audience is obviously going to be younger people. What are their needs? What is it they want to get out of? So from the start, you start creating your event based on who's at the heart of it. So that's going to dictate where you do it, the time of year you do it, the time of the week, evening or a daytime or the weekend. And from that, you can start building a picture of how the event is going to run. So what the type of event? Is it going to be indoors, outdoors? Is it going to be, is it a festival? Does it have any licensing issues? All these questions you start asking yourself now. And I would suggest keeping a notebook or a scrapbook or something where you start writing everything down, or if you want to do it on a computer. So once you've decided who's it for, what type of event I'm doing, you then need to think about where. This is probably the most important aspect. So I'm just going to pull up my notes. So where are you going to hold it? And what type of event you're doing is probably going to impact on where you're holding it. So if you're deciding that you're going to do a football tournament for a group of teenagers, you're probably going to need a football pitch. So already you've narrowed down your search as to what kind of venue you're looking for. And likelihood is that it's then probably going to be an outdoor venue. But likely if you're going to do a talent competition, it's probably going to be an indoor venue, and therefore you're going to need somewhere with a stage or a large hall that you can host it in. So you're already helping your search and narrowing down your options by the type of event you're going to do. So a really important question, which a lot of people actually forget about, is the why. Why am I doing it? What am I wanting to achieve from my event? It could be purely you just want to raise some funds. So if you're doing a fundraiser, you've got to think about what activities am I going to have that I'm actually going to get money for to bring back into your charity or your organization. Because putting on an event usually isn't, I mean, it can be inexpensive, but there are always going to be costs involved. So if the purpose is to raise as much money as you possibly can for a charity, you don't want to be looking at hiring an expensive venue or having too many components that require an initial spend. So another why for doing your event is I want to raise awareness about a particular cause, or it might be about your group or a charity. So that's going to come back to the what. So all of these who, what, where, why, whens are interlinked. It might be that you just want to do the event just for fun. You want to bring some people together and have a good time. So the purpose of your event is a really important question. So I tend to write these down and then make some notes underneath it, because this is kind of what keeps you focused. And if you're going off track and you're thinking, actually, hang on, I don't know why I'm doing this, refer back to who, your what, your where, your why, and your when. So the when, this is obviously going to be what's the date for your event. It's also the time of year, because if you're, let's say, you're organizing something for Christmas, you're not going to be holding it in the middle of summer. So it's seasonal. And also if you're going to be doing it midweek, weekend, evening, daytime, and this is going to come back to your target audience. What are their needs and what are their access needs? And if it's for school children, you obviously aren't going to be doing it in school time in the middle of the day. So a lot of your queries or questions can be answered by just nailing down these 5 sort of aspects of your event. So just reading from my notes a minute. So for today, I'm going to look largely at smaller community events, because that's probably what's most applicable to all of you. And once you've decided all of these things, we can then move on to the next So once you've got your who, what, where, why, when, it's going to be choosing a venue. So choosing a venue is probably the biggest decision you're going to make on you're organizing your event. It's got to be within budget. Where is it? So you might, to go back to the budget, sorry, availability is a really big issue. So if you decided that you want to hold an event outside of in the term time, in the middle of the week, it's availability. It might not be able to hold you the venue you want, you might not be able to get on the date you want it. And that might not be a deal breaker, but you then have to go back to your who's it for. So you might have to make some compromises at times, but that doesn't mean to say that's going to be the end of the event. So when you're thinking about your venue, the location is really important. Going back to your target audience, you need to think of their access needs. Some of them might not drive. So you want to choose a venue that's appropriate for the needs of your customers, but it's also within a reasonable distance. So does it have good transport links? Do your target audience drive? Is there a footpath nearby? And also, is it in the town of the people you're trying to organize an event for? So if you're doing something for child, there's no point organizing it in Yeovil. And that seems fairly obvious, but actually it's something people don't think about. And in the area we live in here, it's quite rural. We don't have the best transport links. So, and not everybody drives. So if you've got a community that you're organizing an event for, you probably that might not have access to cars, you might want to look for a venue close to them. There are often lots of smaller village halls, or even in the towns in Yeovil. I use Yeovil because I've worked in a lot of the venues. There's places, smaller community halls that can be hired that might not tick all your boxes, but if you can get your people there, that's the most important thing. So the capacity of the venue, you need to make sure it's going to be large enough for everybody you want to attend, but at the same time, you don't want it too big, because if you're only holding an event for, let's just say 50 people, and you've hired a massive venue, they're going to feel drowned in it. So you need to make sure the space you're using is appropriate to the number of people you've got, equally too big or too small. So facilities. Often you think, I just need a space, but you might need other things, other aspects to your event, because if the venue you choose doesn't have everything on site that you need, you're then going to have to hire it or pay to hire it. So that's an additional cost. So let's just say you're going back to you're having a talent competition, a sort of mini music festival. You're going to need to hire in lights, staging, a PA, a music system potentially. And if the venue you're hiring doesn't have that, that's then an additional cost. So in the beginning, when you're setting out your budget, you need to identify, okay, this venue might be more expensive than another one, but if it's got everything I need and I don't have to hire it in, that's going to save you money, because ultimately hiring everything in separately costs more than hiring a venue that probably has it all already there. Of course, you can borrow things from people if you've got access or you have good contacts that might have some of the additional equipment that you need for your event. That's absolutely fine, but it's something to consider at the start when you're choosing your venue. Car parking. So many events I've been to or have worked on, and this is often the last thought, but actually it's probably the most important part, because what's the first thing people do when they arrive at your event if they drive? They need to park. And if they can't park on site or there's not enough car parking spaces, they're just left frustrated, and that could instantly be a barrier to them attending. They might just turn around and go. So this goes back to how many people you're expecting. Has the venue got adequate car parking facilities for everybody that's going to attend? And that doesn't include just your customers, that includes any staff you might have or volunteers. And also, if you've got suppliers coming in and out, they're going to need car parking as well. So it's a really important thing to consider. And also, if you're holding, let's just say you're holding a green event, you might not need a car park because you're trying to encourage everybody to walk or bring a bike because it's a green event about the environment. But have you got places for people to put their bikes safely? Can they actually walk to the venue safely? So people's access is probably the most important thing. And that will also impact on the wider community near the venue who might not be attending your event. But if people start parking on driveways or in front of people's houses, then that's going to leave a negative feeling towards you, your organization. So from the start to the finish of your organizing your event, the people you're coming into contact with are going to be getting a feel for you and your organization. So the whole time you're publicizing yourself. So you don't want to have a negative impact from your event. It wants to be a positive thing. And so the final point to consider when choosing your venue is the feel of it, the atmosphere, and possibly something that people don't think about. But actually, when people have hopefully parked safely or walked or parked their bike and they enter the venue, how do they feel when they walk in? What's the entrance like? What was the car parking like? As in, is there rubbish everywhere? Is it clean and tidy? And is it appropriate? So you don't want to hire a dark, oppressive indoor space for a children's fun day, and you probably don't want to hire a church for a political rally. So there are going to be venues that are more appropriate to the type of event you're holding. And just consider, what are my customers and those attending my event going to feel like having the event in this space? Right. So once you've got a date, you know what you're doing, and you've chosen your venue and you've booked it, you've paid your deposit, you're going to start thinking about, right, what are the other aspects of my event that I need to get things for?
Alice, we've got
Yes.
a question from Janine, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, when they're new community groups, and being in your profession, is there anywhere that is kind of like a catalogue or a list of the various venues around various areas? Because sometimes you just don't even know where to start to find a venue.
Yeah, really good question. It depends who they are run by. There isn't really a central database, but that's a really good idea. We could have one on the Love Yeovil website for Yeovil. But usually a lot of the community halls or village halls are run by the parish councils that they sit within. Yeovil Town Council run a few of the ones in Yeovil, and SSDC, who we all know will soon to be SSDC, were responsible for some other venues. But no, in a short answer, there isn't a central database for a list of venues. But that might be something that could be looked to be pulled together. That's a good idea. I could look at doing one for Yeovil. It comes down to local knowledge, and I've got further on a point to discuss about permits and things other than the usual licensing, and I only know about them because I know about them, and I've been working in Yeovil for so long. So I think the best way forward, if you're new to this and you're new to an area, is to talk about it, talk to people locally and get local knowledge, because you're not going to beat that. Someone's just put a comment in, have they?
No, that's fine. I think somebody's trying to log in.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. Carry on, Alice.
Okay. So supplies and equipment. So we'll go back to the talent competition one, because it's quite an easy one to use as an example. So what else do you need? So you've got your hall. Does it have a stage? Yes, great, we've got a stage, but does it have the lighting? Does it have the PA system? And then also it's people, because you're going to need potentially someone that's going to be able to run the PA and the lighting for you. So you need to start asking yourself, does the venue have all that I need? And if not, what do I need? And what I tend to do when I'm organizing an event is imagine myself as the person who's attending from start to finish, And what do I see when I arrive? How do I know how to get there? When I arrive, do I want something to eat or something to drink? Do I need to sit down? Where am I going to put my coat? So if you work from a customer's perspective, as you arrive and go through all the steps, where are the loos? Can I find the loos? Are there enough loos? Are they signposted? Is there someone going to greet me? You can start to build up a picture of the things you might need and the things that you might need to think about and how you're going to combat them. Because if all you want is for those attending your event to have a really good experience, so if you can put yourself in their shoes and start thinking about the questions they might have when they arrive, how they get there, then you can build up a picture of the things you might need to think about, and to create either a process or have some equipment for. So toilets is always the big one. Are there enough? If you've hired a greenfield site, so a greenfield site is what it says on the tin, there's nothing there. You found a farmer who's going to let you borrow a field, or you're using an open park in one of the towns. Does it have toilet facilities? Because there's nothing worse than being at an event and having to queue for the loo. I'm sure we've all done it. And it actually, again, is a major, fairly small thing, but will impact largely on how your people feel at your event. So if you don't feel there are enough loos, and this comes back to how many people are coming, that's going to be something you're going to have to hire in. So are there something specific you want? You might need TV screens because you're going to be having presentations or showing a film. Has it got enough tables and chairs? Does it have tables and chairs? And this again comes back to the type of event that you're doing. Maybe you're having a table tennis tournament and you've hired a hall. Does it have table tennis equipment there, or are you going to have to get it there? So once you've come up with your list of what you need, where are you going to get it from? Can I borrow it from someone, or do I have to hire it? Obviously, we want to borrow, not have to pay for it, but that's not always possible. So usually the second major cost for an event after venue hire is equipment hire. And as you're all organising community events, you're going to want to keep this down as much as you can. So finding people that you can borrow things from, or do an exchange of services. They might sponsor the event by letting you borrow something for free, or let's just say it's a generator, and the generator hire company say, well, we'll sponsor your event by giving you a generator, and you just share our details and put us as a sponsor on all the publicity. So they're always round keeping the costs down. I mean, budgeting and costing for events is a whole nother topic, which we won't go into today, but just to be aware of it. But if you've got friends that have said you can borrow things, one thing to be really mindful of is its condition, and is it safe to use at your event, because you're responsible for the health and safety of everyone attending. So that's something we're going to come on to a bit later. And also you need to consider what happens if it gets damaged, and who's liable for that. So part of supplies and equipment is also volunteers and staff. Do you actually need manpower to run your event? If it's just a training session in a village, in a hall or a meeting room, probably not, because it's going to be the one person delivering the training and the attendees. But if you're having, let's just say, the Yeovil Together event, you're probably going to need quite a few volunteers to welcome people, show people where they're going, make sure the stage runs on time. So manpower is really important. Now, volunteers are brilliant because you don't generally have to pay them, but also that means that they don't have to show up. And I have been responsible for training 1,000 volunteers when I worked at Ironman, because the event was run by volunteers. So the Ironman triathlon, for those who don't know, it's a swim, bike, run, and they've got to swim 2.4 miles, cycle 112, and then run a marathon in 17 hours cut-off time. Now, with 1,500 athletes going along a course spread out over a county, that takes a lot of volunteers to run it, because you couldn't pay all the staff you needed to help you run it. So volunteers are really important. but you're also responsible for their welfare with you. So feeding them, making sure they get breaks and rests, but also where are you going to get them from? And then the last thing you need to consider with suppliers for your event is, do I need medical cover? Now, this comes back to the what type of event. A large international sporting event will most definitely need quite a high level of medical cover, but a talent competition or a cake sale, probably not. But it is always good to identify somebody on site that has first aid at work. So at a very, very least, I would suggest that the event organizer or somebody has medical first aid at work training, and there is a first aid kit on site. So most community halls might have that, but that's something you probably want to check is, do you have a first aid kit on site? Can we use it? Because if not, you will need to provide one, and that will need to be easily identifiable on the day. And the person who does have the medical training should also be easily identifiable on the day.
Alice, could I ask a question?
Of course.
I just wanted to know, is there a certain number of people that you would need, you know, a certain number of first aiders for?
So like a ratio of, if you've got 50
ratio,
people,
yeah.
you need 2 first aiders. So there is a book called The Purple Guide, which is the Health and Safety Executive's Bible to organising events. And that is largely aimed at larger scale events. And usually a larger scale event is deemed as an event with more than 500 people. So if you're getting up to or around those numbers, I would suggest having a specific first aider on site, so hiring in a first aider. And you can, unfortunately, it costs, but you can't put a price on people's safety. So there isn't a hard and fast rule. I think there is for toilets actually, but I can't remember what the ratio is off the top of my head. But I don't think there is for medical cover. But usually most of the events I've organised in the past are larger scale. So we've always had medical cover, and it can come in fairly expensive, but you might know someone who is a doctor or a paramedic, and they could be happy to come attend the event and be there as your, you know, standalone medical cover for you, which would then save you hiring in a company to do it. But knowing who is first aid trained on site is so important, and knowing where the first aid kit, and making sure that your volunteers and your staff know that as well, because it might not be you that is the first to realize there's an emergency. So be aware of it, and look up the health and safety. It's called the Purple Guide, the Health and Safety Executives Event Management Guide. As I say, it's more aimed at larger scale events, but there's some helpful things in there. It's called the Purple Bible. All of us event managers have read it. I read it a long time ago. Okay, so the next thing we're going to discuss.
One more question from Janine as well.
Yeah, of course.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Sorry. Yes, we are looking at doing Interfaith Week in November in schools. And so for that, we're in discussions about just using the school hall or the gymnasium or whatever space they give us. We organise the entire thing as you know, bring the tables and the people and the stuff. But as far as the medical and safety and all sorts of that, who would that fall under then? The school, or would we have to organise that?
That's you as the event organizer. If they're solely hiring you the venue for the event, then
no.
Okay.
It is for the school.
It's for the school.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're organising this on behalf of the school,
No, it's a bit grey. Sorry, Alice.
Yeah.
So we are doing what we did last year. We did Interfaith Roadshow, so we went through all the libraries, and now we're going to actually do it in the schools. So we will be holding it in the schools, but the only people able to actually attend it will be the school groups.
Okay.
So yeah.
So I would say that would probably fall to the school.
Okay.
But it is a grey area, because if they're on paper, they're higher, and although they may not be paying you, they are contracting you to provide a service for them.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to take all reasonable steps to ensure that what they're providing is safe. And you also need to do the same to provide reasonable steps that everything, all your activities and everything you're bringing in is safe.
Okay.
So in situations like this, I would have a discussion with them and say, right, what's the plan for medical? Is this, because of it being children, I would say that's probably falling on them, but talk to them and clarify, because there's nothing worse than something happening and everybody standing back going, well, that's not my responsibility. Talk about it now. And there are grey areas in event management. You can't get away from it. So having the discussions before you get to the day of the event and clarifying who's responsible for what means if something happens, everybody knows who's responsible for it and where the liability lies.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I do have another question before you go on to the next slide. Sorry, I'm taking up all the time here.
Please.
We are looking at, I'm sure everybody knows that there are asylum seekers in hotels all over the country. And some of them only a small number in Somerset, that are Muslim. So we're looking to see if we can have some kind of Eid event for them that is in a hall, but actually brings in the wider community, the neighbours and things to make it more welcoming for everybody. Security. What do you do around security and that type of thing? Would you be best to try and find somewhere that came with security, or would you be better just to hire an outside security company?
So usually venues don't come with security. So if you're hiring a venue, I've not come across one yet that, other than very large stadiums, you're having like the FA Cup at Wembley, they will have their own security infrastructure and people that they contract in to do that. But at this level, you would have to hire in your own security.
Okay.
Now, all security operatives now are licensed and they are on a database. So whoever you contacted for that would have people that they're usually DBS'd, and they've got their door tickets so that they can be the security. And it's actually not something I've covered in this, but it is a good point, actually, going back to suppliers, is do you need security at your event? I would imagine at the level, the kind of events we're all organising, it's probably not necessary. Smaller community events, you're going to know a lot of the people attending. So it isn't a risk, but let's just say you're organising a music festival on a greenfield site that, up at Yeovil Showground, you've got a music festival and there's alcohol on sale, then categorically, yes, you would need security. So you need to look at the makeup of your audience, if there's any tension points, and the time of day is largely going to sort of reflect where you're having it. Is it in a built-up area that's not in the nicest neighborhood, and there could be trouble from people coming in, just being able to wander in? I mean, any event can have someone on the door to sort of say hi, welcome, but also as a way of checking who's coming in, because they would go, well, those people don't look quite right. They're not the usual people that have been coming. Let's say you're doing an OAP coffee morning and a couple of young teenagers turn up, and they're obviously not the target audience, but you don't mind them coming in. But they then might say to the event organizer, those two young people have come in, I thought it would be okay. But you've got someone who's aware of who's coming in and out, and they would build up a picture of what's going on. But if you're not got your door license, you can't actually do anything. But sometimes just having a volunteer there welcoming people is enough to actually put any undesirable attendees off, because they're going to be seen the second they get in. So if you feel security is something you do need at your event, there are lots of companies now, and it's a fully regulated and licensed industry anyone you're engaging with should be able to show you their licenses, and whoever they send should they have an ID arm badge that they wear. So check it and make sure it's in date, because I think they have to renew them. I think it's every 5 years.
Okay. Yeah, just because this is a very polarizing topic.
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, okay, thank you.
But just one other thing about security, it can change the feel of an event. So if you've got people on the door with their, because they'll be identifiable, they normally have high vis or a sort of, they normally wear dark uniforms or a shirt and tie, and they'll have their armband, their licenses there on. It can change the atmosphere quite considerably. I've been at events where we haven't had security in the past, but fights have broken out. It was actually at a rugby tournament, and it had been running for a number of years. And we'd never had security because rugby players are generally quite happy drunks. They don't tend to fight with each other. You don't get the football hooliganism and sort of gang warfare as you do at the football matches. And one year we did have a big issue with underage drinking, which we couldn't police ourselves with the volunteers, and with some fighting as the evening kind of went later on into the party. So we got some security guards for the next year's rugby tournament, and it changed the whole atmosphere. The fun, happy, everybody getting on atmosphere just went instantly, and everybody felt like they were being watched and they couldn't have fun. And it almost created an aggravation and a friction point, which, funnily enough, there were more fights because we had security guards. So it's a very hard one to manage, the atmosphere in an event and the feel of it, but it's something to be mindful of because it can change like that. And we'll come on to Yeovil together later, and a group that we had there in the first year, which Justina can say about a group of young people and how they were interacting at the event and how you can change it just like that. So as event managers, it's something that you need to be really mindful of, as if you haven't got enough to do on the day. How is everybody feeling? Okay, so I was going to give a bit of an example about the venue and how that can impact on your event. So we held a lantern parade at Love Yeovil this year. So the lantern parade has historically been run in the town centre using the main high streets in Yeovil as our venue. But due to, if anyone's been into Yeovil recently, it's a building site. So all the high streets being dug up and new paving and lighting and benches is being installed and a new fountain. So there actually isn't any space in the high street to host our lantern parade. So we looked at moving it to the country park, Nine Springs Country Park in Yeovil. We still really wanted to incorporate the high street because part of Love Yeovil's remit is to bring more people into the high street. And holding it solely in the country park meant that we weren't going to be ticking that box because we weren't able to use the high street. But using the country park actually gave us a really good theme for the event. As you can see, a lot of the lanterns are animals. So people use kind of the natural world as the theme and nature to give them ideas to create their lanterns. There's a dolphin that you can't quite see because I've put a banner on it that says Lantern Parade, but it was a really good dolphin. There's a jellyfish and a dragonfly, and we've got a mushroom and a butterfly, and there's a tortoise. So actually using that venue changed the event quite considerably, because usually the lanterns aren't animals, they are more kind of square or simple shapes. But actually people's creative juices really got flowing on this one because we said it's in the country park, let's use nature as our canvas. And because there wasn't a lot of lighting in the country park, that was a bit of a safety concern, whereas usually in the high street there's lighting. So we went and bought lots of solar powered lights and hung them from the trees and lit up the paths with these solar powered lights. So that was an additional cost that we needed to consider that we wouldn't usually have, because we'd usually have the street lights. But the venue came with rangers. So we were really lucky that we had some additional marshals that we didn't have to pay for. And they were very knowledgeable on the park because they work there. So they actually were a huge asset to the event, and it saved us some money because we didn't have to pay for any marshals. And there was car parking on site. So in the town centre, there isn't as much car parking. I don't know if anyone's been to Nine Springs, but there's a car park on site which has a live road. But other than that, there is no live roads that we had to cross. So we didn't have to look at getting a road closure or worry about crossing the roads or having any pinch point where there is, danger, a risk. So although it wasn't the event we would usually have, it was actually better because we held it in the country park, and it really changed it. So it's an example of how moving an event somewhere will change the feel, and how a different venue actually comes with some benefits that you might not have known to start with. And now we want to hold it there every year. We're going to look at expanding it and using the town centre as well. So walking in the town centre and then finishing in the country park. So if your event runs annually, it will change and evolve, and you will build on it. But the venue is really important. So don't underestimate the value and the importance of where you host it. So spend some time on it, and also how that impacts on your suppliers. Okay. So any questions before I move on? Oh, where's my mouse gone?
I just wanted to say that that it looks actually amazing, and the change of venue, it was just genius, because like you said, Yeovil High Street is a nightmare at the moment, and not really enjoyable space. But Nine Springs really, I think that's the best venue, because people really love it, love to spend time with it and in there. So well done! It looks amazing.
Thanks, Joanna. One other thing I will say, so even though Nine Springs doesn't have a road running through it, it does have a public footpath, which is extremely busy, and a cycle route. And that's something we hadn't really considered too strongly before we put the event on. And as the event started, it was about 5 o'clock, and it was in half term, and everybody finishes work at 5 o'clock, and then they cycle home through Nine Springs. So, and then this was something I should have thought about, but as event managers, you will never think about everything, but it's how you then react to something on the day. So there are going to be hiccups and problems. So what we did is we asked everybody who was involved with the parade to just leave half the path free so that the cyclists could still get through, because otherwise it could have been a bit of a disaster. Unfortunately, the cyclists were so understanding, and they could see us pretty far in advance because we were lit up, that most of them actually went round us, and it was fine. But we've already had our debrief and gone, this is something we need to consider for next year, and how we can put some plans in place to ensure the safety of the cyclists, so the people who aren't taking part in our event and the people that are. Okay. So licensing, I think this is the thing that everybody is worried about. So licensing, there are certain aspects of an event that are licensable, or activities. So, and this is an area that many first-time event organisers may not think about or realise that they need to take into consideration. So the nature of your event may affect the type of licence, or the permission or permit or consent that you need to host it. So, and that's not just about the licence to sell alcohol or to have live music. You might need to have a licence if you have people selling food at your event, or to play recorded music. And you might need to have a licence for performance, such as indoor dance or an indoor football match. So this is the one where everybody starts to panic, but don't panic, okay? It's fairly straightforward. So if you've got a licensable activity at your event and the venue that you are hosting it in doesn't have a premises license, or you're not allowed to use the premises license as part of your event hire, then you're going to need to put in a temporary events notice. So a temporary events notice is basically an application that you make to the council to hold your event, and it will cover you to have licensable activities, which I'll come on to in a minute, but for the sake of just now is the sale of alcohol and regulated entertainment. So your temporary events notice will enable you to hold this event for up to 499 people. And that 499 people includes staff and volunteers and also those attending. So you can't just think, oh, I've only got 450 people coming, but you've got 50 people helping you run the event and marshals. So they're included. So if you need to put in a temporary events notice, you do it online. Currently it's on the SSDC's website or whichever your local district authority is. Now, obviously, all of us in Somerset are soon going to be under the Somerset Council. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I would imagine it will be the same process, but on the new Somerset website. Currently, the price is £21, and you can put your application in at any time prior to your event, but it needs to be done at least 5 working days before your event. So as soon as you know you're hosting your event, you've got the date, the venue, and you know you've got an activity in it that's licensable, put your temporary events notice in. So a person can apply for up to 10, it's called a 10 temporary event notices in a year. And if a premises, so let's just say a pub, that's a premises, that'll be a licensed premises, they can apply for up to 15 in a year. So if you're hosting it at a pub in their skittle alley and they're not prepared to let you use their license that they have for that venue, you'd need to put your own in. Okay, does that make sense? Say if not, because I have to keep saying it to myself to make sure I understand it. It's my job. So you can put one in, I say the latest you can put one is 5 working days before your event. So it's a very simple form. They will ask you the date and location. You need to identify the venue, and this can be somewhere without a postcode, so you can use grid references if needed. You need to say the start and the end time, and an event can run under a temporary events notice for over consecutive days, but can only run for a maximum of 7 days. You'll need to put details of who the event organizer is, so the responsible person, and the details of the licensable activities happening at your event. So you only need a temporary events notice if you're having a licensable activity at your event. So licensable activities are the sale of alcohol, and that, hang on, Janice, you got a question? No?
Nope, you're answering it.
Okay, so this includes the sale of alcohol. Now that also includes, let's just say you're having a cheese and wine evening and your ticket price includes a glass of wine. That is classed as the sale of alcohol. Okay, also the supply of alcohol to a club member. So if you're a club and people pay a membership and you're hosting an event and there's alcohol at it, you need a license. But if your event, people can bring their own alcohol, you don't need a license for that. Okay, so people can bring their own alcohol and drink it at your event. That does not need a license. It's only if you're supplying or selling it to the people attending your event, or if your ticket price includes a free drink. Okay. So regulated entertainment. So the list of regulated entertainment includes live and recorded music, plays, films, performance of dance, indoor sporting events, that could be football, darts, wrestling, and boxing and wrestling are also included as a licensable activity, and the sale of late night refreshment. And that is the sale of hot food between the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. unlikely, but I should mention it. Okay, so you're now going, oh my God, I want to have live music, or I want to have a band, or we were going to have dance. Right, don't panic. I keep saying don't panic a lot. I have to tell myself that a lot when organising an event. There are some exemptions to these licensing rules for regulated activity. Now, this gets quite complicated and wordy, but it is all online. You can check it. SSDC's website isn't actually that helpful, but if you just type in temporary event notice exemptions and find another council, there are some councils that have worded it better than SSDC have. Or if you're really geeky, you can look up the Licensing Act of 2003, but that's super wordy and terribly complicated. So the exemptions for licensing says films for the purpose of advertisement, information, or education. So if you need to show a film and it's for educational purposes, let's just say you're having an evening where you've got some young people in and it's a sex education film, you don't need a license for that. So music that is incidental to the main unlicensed activity. So let's just say you've got a Christmas grotto, you don't need a license for that, and you've got some background Christmas music. You do not need a license for that music. So you can show TV and radio broadcasts without a license. Any entertainment for religious purposes that's at a place of public worship. Morris dancing. I don't know why. Morris dances are exempt. So plays between the hours of 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. if the audience does not exceed 500. So it's a dance, again, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. if the audience doesn't exceed 500. So you can show a film as long as the event is not for profit. So that means if you've got a community, so in a community premises, so if the event is not for profit and it's held in a community premises between 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. and the audience does not exceed 500 and that you have permission from the premises owner and you have to abide by the age classification of that film, you can do it. But not for profit includes, and this is where it gets a bit difficult, if you're raising money for a charity, so let's just say there's a ticket price to come and see this film in the community hall, and all the profits from the evening go to a charity, that still means that it's for profit, even though the profit is for charity. So you can charge to come in, but the fee that you charge can only be to cover the costs of putting the event on. So you can't make any profit. If there is any profit made of showing a film, then you have to have a license for it. So you couldn't have a charity film night, basically, to raise money for a charity. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes. Chevy's got a question.
Go, Chevy.
Yeah. Hi, Alice.
Hi.
Just like there is a slight confusion, like any entertainment for religious purpose. So, and there was in the previous slide, there was like any programmed activity, like any performances or anything needs to be licensed. But if they are for like community event, and if they are for religious purpose, like not for properly religious purpose, but for example like Diwali celebration or Holi celebration, and we are having program performances on stage, so do we need a license for that?
No, there's another bit about, so dance. So if you're having some dance, is it dance at
Yeah.
the Diwali celebrations? So dance
Yeah.
between 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. with less than 500 people in the audience,
Yeah.
you don't need a license.
Okay. Any performances, dancing, or maybe a small act, because it is also there. I think the plays between 8 to 11, right? Less than 500 audience.
So I'm coming on to the unamplified music and amplified music. So
Yeah.
it is difficult. But the thing is, if in doubt, just apply for a temporary events notice. It's
Okay.
£21.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean they're going to say you can't host your event. I've never known of one not be accepted. I've never had one that's been refused. So if you're in doubt, just apply for one. It's £21. It's a really simple form online, and you should get a decision, because then you're covered even if you don't need it.
Okay.
That would be my advice.
Yeah. Okay. I will keep that in mind. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Because trying to figure out what is and isn't okay according to this list can get confusing.
Yeah, that's why, because there was slight confusion. There was like, for performances you need a license, but I think all the things are listed in this in exemption mostly. Like plays are there, dance is there. So
going back to what you need a license for,
we just got 2 more questions, Alice.
Yeah, I knew this was going to happen here.
It's got Janine and then Joanna.
Okay, I just want to pick up on what Chavi was saying, because you know, my work and the people I'm here representing today are religious faith belief organizations. So where you've got, or for religious purposes, or at a place of public worship. So many of the small in number faith communities that I work with don't actually have public places of worship. They hire halls, or they have it in somebody's yard, or what, the park, or whatever. So does that actually say any entertainment for religious purposes anywhere, or does it have to be in a place of worship?
That's how I've read it.
Okay.
Yeah. But as I said to Chevy, there is no harm putting a temporary event notice in.
No. Yeah.
And actually speak to licensing if you've got any queries, because they are the experts. I know them personally, the licensing team, because I talk to them so much, and they would rather you email and ask them, do I need one, than or put in an application and say, I'm not sure if I need it, but I've done it, than do it and need one. So if you are in any doubt, ask the licensing team. And at the moment, I'm talking again of SSTC's licensing team, because I do work with them a lot. I basically tell them of everything I'm doing, and they get copies of everything, all of my event management plans, all of my health and safety stuff. I send it to them and the police as a matter of course. So they always know what I'm doing. And they are really helpful. They're not the event prevention police. They want events to happen. So they are your best port of call if you are confused or don't know if you need to get put in a temporary events notice.
I guess the communities that we work with, that I particularly work with, are migrant communities who have come from countries where there isn't mainly as many as strict or stringent rules around them. And so sometimes the response is, but if I put this in and they refuse me, I'm not going to be able to have my event. So, you know, kind of, I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist. So, you know, what do we say to them? That it's highly unlikely it's going to be refused, unless, of course, I don't know, something terrible. Yeah.
I mean, the ones that they might look more seriously at are the ones with the sale of alcohol.
Okay.
Those are the ones that they're going to really scrutinise, because obviously the implications of the sale of alcohol, has it been done responsibly? How is the Underage Drinking Act being managed? What's the impact on the surrounding area, the noise, the nuisance? So I'd talk to the licensing team. I mean, if they don't want to, but I have read this and I've checked it on several different council websites. I've gone to like Reading, and just to read the different, how it's all been worded differently. And I did actually read the Licensing Act of 2003, and I looked at the exemption list, and I have read it as any entertainment for religious purposes is exempt. So if you need it clarifying and put in writing, I would speak to licensing. I mean, I can do that and ask Anita is her name, if that is correct, and I can get back to you all on that if you would like to know, because I understand that, you know, the communities you work with, this is probably an important question.
Yes, I agree. Oh, sorry, Justin.
Fine.
I was going to say, yes, I agree, and that would be good. But also on the other hand, we're about learning about how to actually do this. So yeah, maybe just give us the information about where we can get it, because it's good to actually, but I don't know, Justin, what you would think.
No, absolutely fine. The other thing I would add is I'm not an events manager in any way, shape or form, but I've filled out these temporary events notices and they're very simple. really
It
simple
is
to fill out. You just Google it and it's there, and you just fill it out. Literally takes a few minutes, and then it's done. And they let you know within a couple of days, I think.
Yeah.
And then you've got it, and it's only £21. So yeah, it's worth doing if you're unsure.
And also, the nature of your event might change as you go, oh, let's do this as well, and then you might need it. So if you've done it, you're covered.
Joanna's got her hand up, but Lewin's got her hand up now if you want to ask a question.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to know about events that have over the number of 500.
You will need a temporary event notice.
Is it still £21 or?
Yep.
It's
Well,
£21
sorry, events that are over
above.
5. Oh, I see. So because the temporary events notice only covers if you've up to 409 people. If you've got more than that and you've got any of those, then you'll need a premises license. So you will need to apply for a premises license for the time of your event, and that is a much bigger, more complicated kettle of fish.
Okay.
And that then goes to the police. They have to put, I think you have to do it at least, you want to do that as far in advance as you possibly can, because they will then scrutinize every aspect of your event, and highways get involved, the police, fire and rescue, council. It's a big beast then. And then
And how much does it cost?
I don't actually know the answer to that one. Well, let me just Google it.
I was wondering as well, so if we, the event we had on Saturday, but it was very well attended, and over the day we had quite a lot of people. But do we count the number of people for that day, or is it sort of the number of people that's actually in the venue at that time?
It's in the venue at any one time is up to 499.
Okay, right, just one.
Okay, so I've just quickly Googled the rates. So there are different, it depends what band it comes under. So it's variable rates. It's probably something you would need to discuss with the licensing team directly.
So it would be the same concept for small events.
Yeah, today is sort of based at smaller events. I'm assuming everyone's going to have under 500 people at any one time, but you can have more people than that at your event, providing it doesn't have a licensable activity in it.
Okay.
So if you're not selling alcohol, or the, or you haven't got regulated entertainment.
Yeah.
Pardon?
It'd be the regulated.
You only need a temporary events notice if you are having over 500 people. Sorry, if you've got regulated entertainment, any of those licensable activities, so alcohol, regulated entertainment, late night refreshment, if any of those are at your event, you need to have either a temporary events notice if it's under 500 people, or if it's over 500, you'd need a premises license.
Okay.
And a premises license is a big beast. That's a longer, bigger project to manage. But if you've got over 500 people at your event and no licensable activities, you don't need a license or a temporary events notice.
Okay. Thank you.
Joanna's got her hand up, Alice.
I just wanted to ask Alice, because what I'm planning to do is help the two Ukrainian ladies with her vegan restaurant do the fundraiser and GoFundMe page and everything. And obviously it's to support their future business, but it's more about that because it's like a huge thing, and they came from Kiev and they just want to continue what they've done in Ukraine. They want to run the restaurant, and they've got a huge support from different organizations. I'm really proud of them. But can I just contact you probably just directly, so we're not going to take this time here for everyone? If you can just guide me through it, because probably the licensing would be totally different if it's for business and in Quidam.
Yeah, if they're going to be opening a premises and a business, then yeah, that's not an event per se. That's a different licensing beast altogether. So
if I can just come back to that, just private, I email you, and we can. we can just discuss
Yeah,
that. But
I can point you in the right direction, and I can give you the licensing email, and you can have a chat with them. And if I can answer any of the questions, I will. But as I say, I'm not an expert in premises licenses, just
okay.
when it comes to events, and I'm not even an expert in that.
But thank you, Alice.
Okay, right. So if there are any questions on this, then, and I can share these slides if you want them. I'm happy for them to be shared with everybody if this is of use. But it's easily findable on Google, so that information is out there. Okay, so the next scary one, which actually does come under licensing. So if you put in a temporary events notice, it will be shared with environmental health. So they will know about your event. So once you've submitted your application, it's reviewed by the licensing team. The application is then shared with the consultees of licensing, who are the police and environmental health. And they then have 3 days to raise any objections. If there are any objections raised, they're then shared with you. And if not, you get your license to carry on with your event. So environmental health, if you have, so when you fill out your temporary events notice online, there will be a bit where you kind of have to say what's going on at your events, what the licensable activities are, and give a bit of a description. So if you put there's going to be food sold, environmental health will likely be contacting you. Now, again, I have a good relationship with environmental health at SSDC, and they are not there to prevent any event taking place. They want events to happen because it's good for the local economy, it's good for the community, it's good for the area. So environmental health are going to want to know about any of the food that you've got being sold on site, is that it's prepared and served safely, and that those handling the food have had some appropriate food hygiene training, or at least someone who has had the training is going to be overseeing them. They aren't as strict with smaller community events, so don't panic. But if you've got vendors at the site, so you've got a burger van coming, for instance, then they will probably want to see the food hygiene rating of that vendor, and there's paperwork that they have to do to get their food hygiene rating. So they will ask to see that paperwork. And as an event manager, you should be collecting this kind of paperwork from all of your suppliers and people that are coming onto site, you know, food hygiene ratings, risk assessments, and copies of insurance policies. So be aware that if there's food, environmental health, if there's food and you've submitted a temporary events notice, environmental health might contact you. But don't be scared, particularly if there are vendors, because that's not your issue. It's put onto the vendors. They just want to check that the vendors are safe. But you do have a responsibility as an event manager to also check that the vendors do have a food hygiene rating. So just be mindful of that. So the next one I wanted to talk about briefly is the Safety Advisory Group, which again, this is an SSDC thing, but most councils will have one. They advise on minimising any inconvenience to the local residents, businesses, and general public, and basically to promote safe events. And they're there to give you some advice and to monitor and carry out inspections of events. So generally, this is just a quick one. This is for larger scale events that they will be involved, not smaller community events. So they wouldn't necessarily be there to give advice to smaller events. But if you're organising a larger scale event with, you know, over 500 people, not necessarily that it has a licensable activity in it, but they'll likely know about it, either from environmental health or from the locality officers, because larger scale events tend to, the Safety Advisory Group have magic powers. They just seem to know about them. But if they don't, as a matter of course, you should probably tell them you're organising a large scale event, because they're very good to discuss things with and make sure that you've considered everything. But it's generally for events with over 500 people. So don't get too worried about that one. Okay, so the next aspect of the licensing is street trading consent. So if your event, you've decided to have stalls for people to sell items to the public, that might mean that you would need street trading consent. So vendors or stalls selling goods or food to the public are considered a street trader. And the public, so if they're selling anywhere where the public has access without payment, so that's if they can get into a place without having to pay an entry fee, you need to have consent from the council for those people to sell their wares, and that includes on private land. And this is an SSDC's policy, I should state. And again, I don't know what's going to happen when we go to unitary, and if there's anybody from Dorset here, I apologise. But it is good to check if you need street trader consent. So if you're selling a service, I should add, it's not covered. So it's a physical thing that someone can buy and take away. If it's shoe shining, for example, that doesn't need a street trader license. So you can apply for an annual, a 6 months, a 3 month, or a daily street trader license. And most likely the one that you're going to need is a daily one, and it's £61 for 1 day. Now, again, there are some exemptions. So, and this is applying to South Somerset. So goods sold at a farmer's market, provided that what is sold is done so within a 30-mile radius of where it's produced. You do not need street trader consent for that, because that's them trying to promote local economy and produce. So if you're running a community event, this is another exemption, which is not for profit, such as a school fete, and there is an entry fee, you do not need to get street trader consent. So a really good example of this, I think is my next slide, is the Yeovil Together. So those of you that may or may not have been to the event, last year we wanted to have vendors selling food at the event. Now the land that it was on is technically privately owned, even though it's owned by SSDC, but it's open access land. So anybody can get onto Mudford Rec, which is where we held it, without paying an entry fee. And the items that were being sold were not produced within a 30-mile radius. So it fell out of the 2 exemptions. Now, we really wanted to have traders there so that we could charge them a pitch fee to raise some more money to keep the event going. So that is classed as a community not-for-profit event. But because the trader retains the profit from the sales, even though they've paid a pitch fee, that's classed as commercial purposes. So the way we had to get around this was to charge everybody attending last year's Yeovil event, Yeovil Together, was £1 to get in. And we had to have a kind of an outline to our event, an edge. So there was a sort of a perimeter fence, in inverted commas. It was a very shoddy perimeter fence. But that was the way around the licensing. But as Justin might want to add, it did change some of the feel. Some of their people coming in weren't overly happy that they had to pay £1 to get in when the year before they hadn't. But getting everybody to apply for and get street trader consent from SSDC, £61 is quite a lot of money when they probably were likely going to be only making about £70 on their stall on the day. So then that just means they wouldn't be able to attend, or they wouldn't have attended. You can look to get trade like a market license, but going back to the premises license example, that will take a lot longer and is quite costly. It costs a couple of £1,000s to get a market license. So there are ways around it, but they're not always liked. I don't know if Justin wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, you're right about the feel of it. It did change, and I think there was, people weren't happy about having to pay, but I think eventually when they realised that it was coming in towards the next event, and it was going back into the event, most people were happy to pay that. And we made sure that the children were free as well. And yeah, I mean, the barrier itself was some tape on some cones, which people stepped over sometimes. But we just couldn't believe that we had to have some kind of a physical barrier. And I will talk about that later on, about how that's progressed and things. But yeah, I think the thing to note is when there are issues, there are generally a way around the issues, and it just takes a little bit of thinking and a little bit of discussion with the right people, and eventually, you can make it happen.
Just adding to that, I mean, I don't know if this is what you're going to say in a minute, but we've actually changed venues for Yeovil Together, but I'll let Justin talk more about that. And changing venues has actually overcome more hurdles than, but is the feel of the event going to change? But we'll talk about that in a minute. So those are your main licensing, legal requirement, kind of permissions that you need to consider for your event. But there are some others, permits. Now, these come down to local knowledge and the local area, and they're going to be specific to where you're holding your event, and they're not always easy to know. So obviously you're going to need the permission of the landowner or the person who owns the building that you want to have your event at. But within Yeovil, there are actually some public areas that you need to apply for a permit to use for an event. So one example of this is the green outside St John's in the town centre. Now, everybody assumes that the area surrounding the church in Yeovil is owned by the church. It is not. The church actually gifted it to SSDC 100 years ago or so because they didn't want to look after it. And now it's owned and run by SSDC. Now, it's a public space, but it's privately owned. So the public have access to it without payment. But if you want to use it for an event, you have to apply to SSDC for a permit. And that's a formal, you just have to send an email with your risk assessment for the event and a copy of your public liability insurance and some details of what you're doing. And they usually give permission. But it's good to be aware that there might be other permissions you need to get to hold your event somewhere. And unfortunately, I don't know what they are. So talk to local people, talk to the people that are involved with the venue. If it's a greenfield site, talk to the neighbours because they might know. But just make sure you've explored all options and that you have all the necessary permissions. Okay, so health and safety. It's often left to the last minute. And a request from the venue or the landowner triggers a mad rush to pull together your risk assessment. But from the start of your planning, you need to start considering who's going to be attending and the risks involved. And those attending include your suppliers, volunteers, staff, the general public, and your customers. So as you start planning and building up the event, you need to think, how am I going to do this safely? So how am I going to get all of my contractors in safely at the same time? Perhaps there isn't a lot of car parking, so you might need to work out a rota so that you haven't got 10 cars in the same place all at one time jamming up the road. Smaller events you might just need to do a basic risk assessment, but larger scale events, you probably want to consider compiling an event management plan. And that consists of a breakdown of the complete running of the event from start to finish, broken down into specific sections with instructions for each area and considerations for safety at every point. And it also includes breaking down the running order and all contacts. So the event management plan, which don't worry about if you're only doing a smaller event, is basically a Bible, and anybody could pick it up and understand how your event runs and run the event in your absence, basically, and it covers all health and safety aspects of it. So we'll move on to risk assessments, because that's kind of what's going to be most applicable to you guys. So no one likes writing them. I hate it. And I hate pulling them together, but it is the basic tool that everybody needs to do to ensure you've thought about the overall safety of your event and everyone who's attending. So the Health and Safety Executive have quite a helpful website. And what I do when I'm doing my risk assessment is I break it down into different sections. So setting up my event, my customers arriving, the event itself, customers leaving, and me clearing away the event. So I've got those 5 areas that I've got to think about the risks, because they're all slightly different. As I said earlier, if everybody's arriving to set up, where are they parking? How are they carrying everything? Is there any trip hazards when they're carrying things? How many people are going to be there at the same time? So there's different things to think about at each stage of your event. And then the next stage, once you've broken down, you've got those 5 different areas, is you've got to identify the hazards in each of those places, assess what the risk is, control the risks, record your findings, and review your controls. So number 1, if you're identifying the hazards, so imagine your event set up through to completion and think about what's going to cause harm. So think about events that you've been to and what hazards you might have seen. So an example, so you've gone to the Yeovil Together event and there's some power cables running from the stage to the generator. That's a hazard. So you've identified it. So next you've got to assess the risk. You now need to decide how likely it is that someone could be harmed from this and how serious that harm could be. So who might be harmed and how? You might have already done something to control this risk. Say you might have put some cable matting over it so people can walk over it. But can you do anything else? And then who is in charge of making sure that that happens? So the control that you've put in place to manage the risk, who's going to make sure it's done? So controlling the risk, you're looking at what you're already doing, looking at the risk itself. Can you do more? Or can you get rid of the risk altogether? Do you actually need the generator so far away from the thing it's powering? Can it be closer so that they don't have to have cables running through a public thoroughfare? If that's not possible, make sure that you've made the harm as unlikely as possible. There is no way that you're expected to eliminate all of the risks, but you do need to do everything that, and this is the important word, reasonably possible to protect people from harm. So have I done everything that's reasonably possible to protect everybody? And then you record your findings, put it into a table, and then maybe after the event or before the event, and sometimes even during the event, you review these. So I've put an example of my risk assessment. I think this was for the Lantern Parade. Yes, it was. It's a basic table like this. So I've identified the hazard, who's at risk, what is the risk, how have I reduced it, and who's in charge of actioning that. So it doesn't need to be complicated. I'm happy to share this with everybody if they want it afterwards. I can do that. But the most important thing is you've thought about it, and that word reasonable. So have you done everything that is reasonably possible to ensure the safety? Because it comes down to negligence. And if you've done things that's reasonably possible, you've gone out of your way to mitigate any negligence on your part to people's safety. So every event, as a minimum, needs to have a risk assessment. And you need to consider everyone attending. Okay, are there any questions on that? Oh, I thought there would be. Okay.
Just in the chat, Serena's saying yes, please, for the risk assessment. So if you could just send it to send it to participants here.
So we're coming to the end now. So I think this is lastly, insurance is, do I need it? Yes, you do. So as part of your doing everything reasonably possible, you need to have insurance to cover yourselves for your event. Now, smaller community organizations, you probably don't have a legal entity yet that you could or can afford to apply for an annual policy that covers everything you do. And that's absolutely fine. But at the very least, you need to look at having one-day event insurance for the day of the event. Then that will cover you. If you Google one-day event insurance, you can even get it if you're a stall holder at an event. So I cannot stress enough the importance of having it, and it should be as 5 million as the cover, as the lowest you should go is what's recommended is 5 million cover. And And if you've got any subcontractors, so let's just say someone's putting up a bouncy castle for you, you need to get a copy of their insurance and also their risk assessment. If you've got stall holders, and I assume a lot of the stall holders could be community groups or sole traders, but they should still themselves have insurance and a risk assessment which they supply to you, because you've got to ensure that they're also doing everything reasonably possible to make sure that their activities on the day aren't going to harm anybody. So that's why you have to ask for their risk assessment. So I did a quick search for this, and some of the cover can start from a basic as £12. Obviously, the complexity and the makeup of your event is going to change the fee that you'll pay for a one-day event insurance. But I can't stress enough, you should have it, and everybody attending your event, like a stall holder or a contractor, should also have their own insurance. Now, I think that's it. I am done. Have you got any questions that you haven't already asked?
I'm just so glad that your voice managed to make it all the way through.
It's going.
Yeah, it got croakier and croakier towards the end. It's a bit worried there.
Stop sharing now so you can see me.
Any
I hope I
thoughts?
haven't scared anybody or put anyone off. And one thing I will say is just be methodical, be organized. I keep a spreadsheet and I list everything on it, their contact details, what I've agreed, what they want, when it was confirmed. Have it in one place, because there's nothing worse than getting to the morning of your event and you can't find the contact number for the guy that's bringing the ice cream van. So if you just have a basic list of contact details and what that person's doing at the event and when you confirmed it, and their name, and that would help you hugely. I also am meticulous about writing like running orders, what the timing of things, like I'm going to arrive on site, the ice cream van's arriving here, the stage man's arriving at this time. So to set it all out, and it's so useful. And a basic list of contact numbers, and print it out, because on the day I can guarantee you won't find it on your phone in an email. So print it out and have a little folder. And I also take a box with me to every event that's got paper, scissors, pens, blue tack, sellotape. So I've got a little box that's always made up. It's here in my office. And I also have in that an accident log, which is, have I got it here? No, I haven't. It's just a really simple little notebook that I've put event accident log. So if anything happens, I write it down in there, and have that box on site. So because you are going to need sellotape, or you're going to need a pen, or you could need some drawing pins or blue tack. So just having a basic box with some things in it, maybe some bin bags as well, because the thing a lot of people also forget about is clearing up. You've got to leave the site as you found it. So you can never have enough bin bags and rubber gloves. Brilliant. Anything anyone wants to ask me? If not, I'll assume I've given a very comprehensive presentation. My work here is done.
You have. It's been amazing. Janine, you've got a question or a comment or something?
Yes, no, it's been amazing. Thank you, Alice. But I just want to ask, well, kind of, I'm not sure if it's really a question or a comment or open to the discussion. So, you know, my role is interfaith and belief, and really it's about trying to help communities engage with the wider Somerset community. For example, with Chavi, the Hindu faith has some great religious events that could really bring in people around the community. You know, I've lived most of my life in the Southern Hemisphere, where the Diwali and Holi are huge public events in the end. You know, they have huge fireworks and big parks and things like that. So so how do you I guess what it's not really a question, more of a comment that I'd like you to kind of comment on. Are there any kind of barriers? What kind of barriers would we find to bringing, like, also, for example, you know, the solstices with the Druids and pagans, you know, trying to actually get them, or trying to have their festivals involve people larger than just in Glastonbury or whatever. So how what is the best way to kind of approach that? I think I'm asking.
So, first of all, I think those events would be really, really welcome in the area. Just from running Yeovil together with Justna and doing the cultural days last year, there is a huge appetite for different and learning other people's cultures and doing something that hasn't already been done. It's there's particularly in Yeovil, I think there's a massive appetite for it. So, with regards to going about organising that, I guess potentially that could be a fairly large event and drawing a fairly large crowd from a wider area. I wouldn't say, let's just say you organize it in Yeovil, for example. You would probably draw in a lot of people from the surrounding areas and a wider area, you know, maybe Glastonbury, Frome, the rest of South Somerset. Now, the first thing that kind of flagged up for me when you started talking about it was access, car parking, and highways. So, and my instant thought was I would use a greenfield site. So I was thinking of the Yeovil Showground. It's a large greenfield site. It does have toilets on site, but the site can be broken down into areas, so you could have car parking up there because it's on the outskirts of town. That would probably be easier with regards to access because everyone's going to be driving. So highways would probably be the biggest concern when you're getting into events sort of like this. If you're thinking about doing something larger, then highways want to see your traffic management plan. So how are you going to manage the additional traffic that you're bringing to the area? And then that then gets expensive because you probably have to bring in a company because you need to have specific qualifications to manage or put traffic signs out. But if you wanted to do a smaller one, say in the town centre, I don't think there's necessarily going to be any barriers to doing it. It's just thinking about how to manage potentially the amount of people that are going to attend, because I'm assuming it'll be free to attend. It's not going to be ticketed. So the advantage of doing a ticketed event is you sell tickets in advance. You know I'm going to get X amount of people. So you know I need X amount of toilets, X amount of this, that, and the other. I need this many marshals. If it's just an open event with no ticket, anyone can turn up at any time. You have no idea how many people are going to come. So you've got to think of the worst case scenario and how am I going to manage that and potentially all those people. Does that help?
Yes, yes, it does. And just before Chavi comes in with a question or comment, really what we are about, and working with Justna, is supporting these groups to do their own thing. So not taking over ourselves, but actually helping them and supporting that engagement. And that's really my role, is to find these smaller in number faith communities to support that engagement. And I guess also it would be about finding other people in the area, other nonprofit or charity organisations that are also in that role to support a larger event.
That's what we do at Love Yeovil.
Yeah, so am I good?
Yeah, go.
Yeah.
Chavi.
Yeah, so like Jenny said, the events we have been organizing on a smaller level, on a community level right now. I mean, we are managing it by contribution. So each member who is coming has to pay some amount, and we are managing like some of core members, and we have a group core team which is working about finances and managing everything, and then we are providing some food in that whatever our budget is, and then we are managing. So like if we want to held an event on an open level, like where everybody is welcome from, like Yeovil, the whole Yeovil. So how? It's really very difficult to imagine how we can do that, because
You're talking about promoting it, how you attract.
not promoting, like Jane said. Say for example, I am now I know so many people who know about the Diwali event or Holi event. They told me that they want to come. So out of community, like they are not from our community but from outside, but and some are still coming, but we need to tell them that okay, you have to pay this certain amount. But sometimes it feels awkward, like we don't want to do that, that okay, you have to pay. Is there any way we can do it like open to everyone who feels like, who want to become part of that celebration?
So do you want to know a way to, is it sell tickets, as it were, to anyone that wants to attend? That kind of doesn't sound right, selling tickets to it, but how can you get a contribution from those attending?
Yeah, or if want to make it free, say for example.
Yeah.
So is it possible to like held it in town center, or I mean, to get the place somewhere from the council, if we apply for that place, like where we don't have to pay, so if there is no cost, we are like volunteers will be there to just celebrate. Few things will be on voluntary basis, but there won't be so much charge that like anybody has to bear that charge. Or if there are certain, like right now, from the cost of hall,
So
we are
if you wanted to do it outside St John's in Yeovil,
yes.
there's no charge to use that space, but you have to have the permit.
Okay.
And you'll need to have insurance.
Okay.
So it'll be the cost of insurance. You don't have to pay to hire the space, but they will, I would say, they will probably want to see an event management plan for this.
Okay.
So that's not just a risk assessment. An event management plan includes a risk assessment. So how you're going to manage it, what you're going to do, who's doing what, you know, what the setup times are, what's the timeline for the event.
So
And
like we did for the Indian Cultural Day, like similarly we can have some event like that, you mean?
yeah, I mean, if you want to do it in one of the shops, you want to do it
Yeah.
in one of the shops in Queedam, or do you want to do it outside St John's?
I mean, it's just an idea, because the
I think it's a
from
brilliant
Jane's
idea,
questions, I
and I
got
definitely
the
think
idea
that,
that yeah, right now we have been like last 3 years, leave the COVID year, but from
yeah,
2019 we have been doing these events regularly. So maybe like Jane gave a really nice idea that okay, you I was just thinking if we can
lovely
be
idea.
open to everyone and
Yeah,
welcome everyone, so that would
yeah.
be really lovely. Yeah.
It would. I'd love to try and help you make that happen. So maybe we talk about it, shall we?
Yeah, we will. Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Alice.
That's fine.
Last question from
Can,
Janine.
yeah, can I just ask, is there a you know, particularly for Shavi and the organisation in Yeovil, but generally, is there someone that perhaps Justine, you could answer this question as well, if you know, is there anybody within the councils that actually will help these smaller groups that are now trying to make their events bigger with information? Is there anybody that they would approach?
They could email the safety advisory group. There is a chap called Nigel O'Grady at SSDC, but because we're going to unitary very, very soon, I don't know who's going to be responsible for what. And what I have been told from my contacts within SSDC is that events aren't going to be high on the radar of importance when they've changed over, because there's obviously going to be a lot of internal stuff they've got to reorganize. But if anybody wanted to contact me, because I have a very good relationship with SSDC and their economic officers, and with the people to get the permits from SSDC, I could always do a filtration process. And if there's anything I can't answer, I can say, look, this is such and such within SSDC. They can help you with this aspect. So I'm very happy for people to contact me, because I've just had some funding from SSDC to actually create a document for them to give to people about how to organise an event in Yeovil. So I've got to, basically what I've just told you guys, I've kind of got to put into a Yeovil specific document that will be shared out. So yeah, contact me and I will probably, I'm 99% certain I'll be able to help.
Perfect.
What's your email address, if that's all right to ask?
Yeah, we just to you share it with everybody, or should I put it in the chat?
Could you just put it in the chat if you don't mind?
Yeah, cool.
Chat.
That would be great.
What's chat?
How do I do that? That one.
Complete Luddite. I don't know.
Well, I can share it with you, Lewin, if you want. I can share it online.
Hang on a minute.
Thank you.
It was at the start. It's alice.edmonds I'll put it in the chat as well. Edmund has an O. At outlook.com. But if you go to loveyeovil.com, you can contact me through there.
Brilliant. Thank you. We've got about 8 minutes, and I thought I'd just use that small bit of time at the end just to have a, well, just to tell you my experiences really. I don't come from an events management background at all. So I started my job about just over 3 years ago for Somerset Diverse Communities. And part of my role was to organise multicultural events around the county to celebrate culture and diversity, bring people together, promote community cohesion, all of that. And I'd never run an event. So I had to learn pretty quickly. And I actually really enjoy it now. I've been doing it for a couple of years, and Alice has been an amazing support and amazing place for advice about, oh my God, what do I do about this? And she was like, right, okay, don't worry, don't worry. So I thought to myself, what can I say about running an event when you've never run an event? And I wrote a couple of notes, and one was be brave, don't panic. So be brave and just ask people. You know, the more people you talk to, the easier it becomes, because then you can delegate. I think the first year where I ran Yeovil Together, I didn't do much delegating. And then for the second year, it was like, no, you have to, because it's now getting out of control. And being organised is so important. Have a spreadsheet. If spreadsheets terrify you, do a YouTube, training thing for like 20 minutes and just understand how to do a spreadsheet, because it will save your life. Knowing where everything is, having everything in one place, having the contact details of the people that are going to come on the day all in one place with different tabs is an absolute lifesaver. Otherwise, you're just updating things and you don't know where anything is. So I'd say those are probably the key things. And the other thing I would say is, as a person that's run events that isn't an events manager, it grows really quickly as well. So with Yeovil Together, it just started out in a conversation actually with Joanna, who was here in a coffee shop, and how amazing it would be to get some people together and have an event where Yeovil came and celebrated. And the same with Chard Together. It was started off in a conversation, and then I didn't know anybody. It was, it was strange that when we had lots of people in Taunton wanting to do Chard Together, and I was trying to find people in Chard to actually run Chard Together. And then I was put in touch with Serena and then Lewin this year. And it just kind of snowballed, because everyone knows so many different people. And it's so important to really have those conversations with people and be brave about it. So going back to Yeovil Together, I remember this particular incident, and Chevy's going to back me up on this, Chevy, aren't you? I was thinking, I don't, just laughing now, I don't know, I have nobody that's going to be performing on the day. What can I do? I don't really have a budget. I'm just going to cold call some people. And Chubby was on my list. And I rang Chubby and I said, hello, Chubby, you don't know me, but I've heard of your name. And apparently you go to schools and you've danced in your child's school. And I'm running this event. Would you like to be involved? But I have no money. I can't pay you. And she very kindly was very excited about it. And she said, I would love to be involved. Let's have coffee. So then we wandered off to a coffee shop, and I bought her a coffee, and we talked about it. And we talked about flash mob and how she was going to do flash mob and, Bollywood. And then I said, we're struggling for hosts on the day. She went, no, I can't be a host. Really, no, that is out of my comfort zone. That is not me. And I'm like, yeah, but if I write you the script and all you got to do is stand there and read it out, can you just do that? She went, maybe. Okay, I'll think about it. Am I right, Chubby? Yes, you can back me up on this one.
Absolutely. I've been telling everyone, like the way you told me, okay, Chavi, I will give you the script. Everything will be written. You just need to read it out. I said, okay, I will try my best.
Yes.
And you were
And
there. I stood
yeah.
up and the cat was there, and I was telling, am I doing okay? I was asking everyone, am I doing good?
And it was our first year, wasn't it? And you did so amazing. And I think it was the confidence thing, And I think it's knowing that somebody's there, that's got your back, and not to worry. and we'll find a way through it. And then for the next year, I think you volunteered and said, yeah, I'll be host, you know, I want to do this. And then you got more and more people involved, you got the Indian community involved. And then I think that snowballed into the Yeovil Indian Association and Friends. That's because that came out of Yeovil Together, and now you're running your own events and still being very much involved in Yeovil Together, and it's become this real amazing kind of hub, really. So I've just seen myself how things can really snowball in a positive way. And I remember saying, I'm sure you won't mind me saying this, Trevor, you said it's changed your life just being involved with this, because you have friends that you would never really have made friendships with, and you've got this amazing social life where you're doing so much, you know, as well as your doctor training and everything like that. But it does have that potential, and you know, just support people out there, you know, and be outward thinking and open. So for the first year with Yeovil Together, we had 500 people, and then for the second year we had about 2,000 people. Partly to do with schools being involved. So we had a competition around schools to do like a multicultural performance. So we had 4 or 5 schools, and with school children brings parents. And I think with Child Together as well, I think the first year, which was in February 2020, I think we had about 80 people. Serena, am I wrong? We had 80 people, I counted. This year we had 721 or 20 clicked in and out. But that was because there was just so much energy behind it, and everyone put their heart and soul into it, and everyone, you know, everyone had bought into this idea, that buy-in, that this is our community, this is for us, and nothing like this has happened before. And it has to be grassroots, it has to be from the community, it can't be top down, it has to be bottom up, so people feel connected to the event itself. And yeah, you know, I think Alice has probably covered everything else that I can think of. Yeah.
Things will go wrong on the day. It will happen, but it doesn't matter. And just be prepared for things to go wrong. But that doesn't mean to say your event has failed and that everyone attending's had a bad time, because they probably won't even know. But I beat myself up because I'm a perfectionist. I'm like, that's it, it's the worst event ever because the generator's failed. But it will all be fine, because if you can think on your feet, you will find a way around it. And generally, whatever's gone wrong isn't anything that particularly brilliant.
I think so
far,
just be aware it will,
and don't panic about it.
And I think
It's
very
very
usually does
usually
go wrong. So far, with all the events that I've done, you know, with my little knowledge of them, something has gone wrong. Either a performer hasn't turned up, or they've been ill, and we've had to fill the gap with something.
That's how you learn and improve for the next time.
Yes, that's it. It is all a big learning curve.
I still remember. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. No.
Yeah. So for the Yeovil Cultural Day, I was just, Alice, I was just questioning her. I was asking her every time, what should I do next, and what license do I need, and all sorts of question. Yeah, I was just, that was really. But then, like she said, this end day, there were some hiccups and some things, but everything went well. So yeah.
And now you know for next time, Chevy. Now you know, because you
No,
don't have to
thank
ask
you.
those questions again. Just a couple of points that actually sort of anecdotal points that are really interesting that I wanted to put across was, so the first year together about the security, we actually invited the police to come along, and that worked fine because they were just sort of walking around, being part of, you know, talking to people, chit-chatting, and didn't have that scary feel. But then, you know, they bought a massive police van. I'm thinking, right, okay, I'm not sure why that is, but there are few young people, 13, 14-year-olds, a group of them, about 10 to 12 people, yeah, causing a bit of trouble. And so they just wanted to be sure that they, you know, they weren't causing too much trouble. Then we had the flash mob at the end, where Chevy was doing the Bollywood dancing, and then the young people started dancing as well, but they were dancing in a bit of an erratic way, and they were sort of causing, yeah, a bit of a nuisance. And I think what happened at that point was, so Chavi and Darius were the two of our hosts at Yeovil Together, and Darius then turned it around and then said to Chavi, look, we've got these young people here. They've never danced Bollywood before. Why don't you show them a few moves? And she went, oh, okay then. So then Chavi gets on stage and she's showing them the move. And we've actually got it on video. And suddenly these young people are engaged. Suddenly they're being included in this event, and you can see them all in a line, actually, copying everything that Jerry did. And I think it's just thinking out of the box a little bit and being very, very inclusive with young people and with anybody really, and how you can make that a community. And then right at the end, we had, after that, we had the mayor dancing with the young people. We had the police dancing with the young people. And that was just an amazing thing to see, because there they were chasing them. And suddenly they're sort of dancing together. So it was just really, really lovely to see. And just one more other point before I finish, was about the medical side of things. So we are so lucky to have doctors and nurses that are involved in Yeovil together. And so at the end, for the second event, we had a group of consultants, really. There was a group of them, they put their name forward and they're like, we're a medical team, we're going to be there on the day, this is our table. And we could have had an operation, basically. I think that's what, Alice, what you said, isn't it? Like, forget the waiting list, you've got your own your little tent up, consultant, anaesthetist, and a consultant, something, surgeons, all sorts of people. So I think it's about tapping into your community as well, knowing people's skills, asking people and putting it out there and really asking, we need this, can anyone do that? And most of the time people are so enthusiastic about it, really, really happy to be involved and kind of have their name on that. Like, that's my department, I'm dealing with that. And just delegate, as much as you can. And it should hopefully be an amazing event. And as we've seen with Child Together and Yeovil Together, the footfall, the numbers from 79 to 721 and 500 to 2000. I mean, wow. And that's all because everyone's come together, and it's all because people have got that buy-in. They feel that this is our event and we're going to make it happen, by hook or by crook, by any means, really. So yeah, I'm going to end it there, but thank you so much for everybody for being here, and thank you so much, Alice. I mean, I've actually learned so much more, scarily so. I'm thinking, oh, okay, that's a lot.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. So we're going to, this is recorded, and hopefully we'll put it onto our website so lots more people can benefit from Alice's knowledge and other people's experiences and questions as well. And if there are no other burning questions, I'm going to end it. I will send out an evaluation form, if that's okay for everybody here, just to fill out and just to let me know how it went, and if there's anything we can do at Somerset Diverse Communities training wise in the future for different communities. But I'll send that by email. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.